What it is. So I'm out on the road today. Wondering if you guys think my view is fresh, except it's pretty dark. Yeah, I'll have to do it right there, I guess. A little on an angle. Dang, I thought I had it, but not bright enough. So, you got me on an angle. Well, I am in the shade so I don't have a heat stroke. Hopefully we're good. So, doing a little vid in response to the cognitive burnout. You see, we've decided to make a little collaboration series on the topic, what is the real world from a mental health perspective? Very interesting topic. Trying to figure out if us mentally ill folk are really living in the real world. You see, I discussed this last week when I went on down for a job interview in Salt Lake City, in the downtown, which is too congested, Mikey hates, but that's beside the point. When I said on my way home in the vid that I'm not sure I want to be working in the real world, you see, cognitive burnout took this to mind. Got his wheels turning, thinking, what significance do mentally ill play in the real world? Where do we fit in? Where are we at? Do we fit in? That's the question. Do we fit in? We're exploring that answer. Now, in his vid that he just put up yesterday, first of all, go check it out. Excellent material. The guy, and I'm 100% serious, is a genius. Some of the best video material on mental illness I have ever seen. Shout out. Very well done. He talks about the two worlds as if there are two worlds. In other words, the real world and the mentally ill world. He goes into a lot of feelings about the subject, how he fits in, how the mentally ill fit in, or do they, or I guess we should say. Is there a disconnection for the mentally ill in the real world? Are we living in a different place than the rest of them? You see, he feels like he's unplugged from the reality of the real world. Got Mikey thinking about this. You see, with Mikey, as I've said, there are 5 questions to every answer. I started thinking, are the mentally ill unplugged, disconnected on a permanent basis? In other words, the cognitive burnout talks about how he had a traumatic time in his life when he developed the OCD, the PTSD. This is the time he unplugged. He feels like he's looking at the world now through a different lens, a world he doesn't belong to anymore. He's going to the therapy, he's getting the medication, he's doing what he can to try to find his place in the real world, mentally ill style. See, Mike thought a lot about this and came up with a conclusion going back to the 5 questions for every answer. I'm wondering if we can get a little more, break it down a little more, if you will. Mikey's kind of thinking that during his life he's disconnected but reconnected many times. So the question is, do we deconnect for good at a certain point? Do we reach the end? Do we say, no can do, I'm done, and clock out of that darn real world situation? Or can we clock out and clock back in like a time clock at work? Can we clock in when we're feeling safe and secure, when we can hide in the corner and act like everything's okay? And then when that big bad wolf comes knocking at the door like the 3 little pigs, can we clock out? That's my question. I'm going to break down my life a little bit for you, let you know sometimes I've disconnected and reconnected, to give us examples of my theory. When I was a little kid, I always knew I was a little different. I didn't think the way the other kids thought. Even my siblings, I was always a little off, a little too imaginative, a little too weird. Now, if you were to ask people, they would tell you, no, Mikey was a pretty normal kid. But only Mikey has Mikey's puck. Mikey's brain. Only Mikey knows if he was a little disconnected as a child. You see, I always did things the way Mikey wanted them done. Follow the leader or get the hell out is kind of how things rolled with the Mikey. Mikey was living in his own little world, and you were either part of it or you were to get the crap out of it. That's how I rolled. That's how I kept things safe and secure. It carries on to this day. But back then, Mikey didn't know about the generalized anxiety disorder. He didn't know about the Bipolar 1. He didn't know about the avoidant personality disorder. He didn't know about the paranoia. He didn't know about the panic attacks. All he knew is he was a little different. Mikey also had some disassociations where I got a little pissed. Example, one time, me and the homeboys from the neighborhood were playing a friendly basketball game in the front. No big deal, but it was a big deal to Mikey, apparently, because when my best friend, my soul brother, hit the winning shot on me, I had to clock him in the face. Now, okay, I was a little angry. People get angry, but you see, there was a little different situation here. You see, the Mikey was not in Mikey's body, really. Mikey had dissociated. He had unplugged. Mikey was watching the events from above, like he was dead in a ghostly state. You see, Mikey asked a lot of doctors, why does Mikey get so angry and seem like he's not himself? Because right after the event, I would run over, I would hug him, I would tell him I loved him, and I was so sorry for what I did. This happened many times, and it wasn't just with him. You see, Mikey had problems. Mikey was unplugging. Problem is, back in the 70s and the 80s, people weren't really talking about the mentally ill situation. They didn't really want to hear it. They didn't want to deal with it. They weren't really worried about it. They were just putting the people in the darn institution when they had a little incident. You see, if Mikey grew up back in the 50s or later, he'd been put in that darn institution, and they would have locked the key in the door. Mikey would have completely disconnected and unplugged, because that's what happens in the mental wards. The people go into their own little reality. And oftentimes I think it's medication based. But that's a topic for a whole other day. This sucker. Anyway, so Mikey grew up. Mikey plugged in and out throughout his teenage years. You see, with bipolar, it hits you over the head in your late teens, early 20s. Mikey's really hit him in four-year college when he was afraid to leave the apartment. When the wife went to see the psychologist because Mikey was too afraid to go, and he told her that Mikey shouldn't have any kids, Mikey said, F you. Why? Because of my final example, the last part of my story. You see, Mikey had a pops that was the man. He was the legend in the town he grew up in. He was the low man's man. If somebody's being picked on, my dad came to the rescue. He raced hot rods. He worked in the pot bottling shop. You see, my dad had everything. But people didn't know he was disconnecting. You see, the pops had a little mental illness going down. It was even harder to talk about back then than when Mikey was growing up. So the pop spent a life dealing silently. Got married, had us kids. Got a job working in the bank where he's paying off the boss's hooker. Didn't know it. When he found out, he went in and let the boss have it, mentally ill style. Got shown the door. After that, the pops disconnected. He said no more of this frickin' real world work experience for the man. I'm doing my own thing. So my pops from them on, all the years I knew him, he had his own jobs, his own operations. You see, he needed to do things on his time, the way he wanted them done. Sounds a little familiar now, don't it? You see, the pops is undiagnosed bipolar. And I'm thinking his pops was undiagnosed bipolar as well. You see, my gramps got a little mean with people. He drank hard. He dealt in the tobacco. That's how the gramps dealt with the bipolar. He wasn't going into damn nut house because he was a manly man, for the good or the bad. When he was disconnecting, he was getting mean and nasty. When life was giving him the lemons, he was kicking the shit out of it. That's how he dealt. But I wanted to be like my dad. My dad was the man. I love my pops. He was my best friend for many years. We did everything together. But I could never understand why the pops was sleeping all the time toward the end there. The pops was having panic attacks, but those were swept under the rug conveniently. You see, the stigma was there then. The stigma's there now. Difference is, I tell my kids about my trials. I tell my kids about my struggles. I tell my kids about my bipolar. They know what's going down when the dad has to sleep, when the dad gets pissed. But the pop had to be swept under a rug. So he was connecting and disconnecting. He did as I do. He disconnected during nap time. Reconnected to try to take on the world when he had to. The pops died a young man. He died at 59. He was given a chance to come back, as we all feel. To come back to the bitterness, the anger, the depression, the guilt, the fear, the not knowing, the how the hell am I going to pay the bills? he decided to take the ultimate disconnection and say, see ya. Good luck to y'all. I did my time. I paid my dues. I reconnected when I had to. I'm taking the ultimate disconnect. Mikey, don't blame him. Someday Mikey's going to take that disconnect. And Mikey's a little piece of shit upstairs here ain't going to be telling him what to do anymore. He's going to take the ultimate disconnect. Getting back to the main gist, the main topic, to run this sucker out to get this done, because time's running out. Do you disconnect as the time come where you say, I'm done, I ain't doing no more? I've disconnected. The reality's in a different world. I can see it all over there, as Cognitive Burnout says. I can see it right in front of me. I can't grab it. Do we all get to that point? Or can we reconnect and disconnect when need be? That's the question. I'm going to throw back to you, brother. Break it down. Tell me what you think of my theory. Everybody else jump on board the train. There's plenty of room. Tell me what you think. Lay it on me. Let's do this mentally ill style, because that's how we roll. Hope everybody's good. Hope you're well. Hope you're doing your best. I love y'all. I really do. Enjoying the weather. It's a nice day. But my legs are starting to hurt a little bit. But that's another topic for another day. Ciao.